Mr. Speaker, I have about 5 points I wish to just add to the debate that is ongoing. Wonderful suggestions and recommendations and points made by my colleague MPs here. And again, I commend the Treasurer for his hard work, his efforts that he has put in. We are all very much grateful for the constant and consistent reports that he has been presenting in regards to the state of our economy. Sometimes we may disagree with the contents, and we may debate them, as our good friends in the opposition tend to, and this is good. This demonstrates that we have a vibrant democracy, and we should all pat ourselves on the back for this, having such a democracy where we allow criticism and debate to take place. We may not agree with one another, but we should at all times fight for the rights of all of us to express ourselves. My comments, Mr. Speaker, will start with an issue raised by the Governor for Isipik and noted here or mentioned here in the supplementary speech. That is the salaries blowout, which cost Papua New Guinea significantly. Estimates being between 500 million sorry, 300 million to 500 million per annum in salaries blowout. This issue is not a new issue. In fact, it was an issue during the O'Neill government's management of our country, and to the credit of the O'Neill government, they initiated an effort to carry out a review of the payroll. That was in 2014. Unfortunately, an interesting series of events transpired whereby the public service fought back and found many ways not to do or to carry out this review, this very important review. In fact, this is an experience that many of my colleagues here will attest to. The fact that when you want to bring about change, there is resistance. There is resistance from elements of the public sector, especially in the public service, who have become comfortable with the way they often mismanage their responsibilities, mismanagement of which costs this country significantly, especially the taxpayers. So anyhow, in 2020, after taking office, the Marape government reinstituted the Special Parliamentary Committee on Public Sector Reforms, and I was nominated the chairman. And one of the first efforts we undertook was to carry out this review or continue the work that had been undertaken or initiated by the O'Neill government. And we were able to bring all the parties together: Department of Finance, Department of Personnel Management, Department of Treasury, Department of Attorney General. And all these organizations which are housed here at Waigani were all pointing the finger at each other. None of them had decided to come and sit together to address this massive problem, this cost blowout of between 300 and 500 million kina a year to Papua New Guinea. We brought them all to the table. And we said, if you don't resolve these problems, then we continue to escalate. We take it to your ministers. And if your ministers don't deal with this, we take it to the Prime Minister and the NEC. And if finally nothing happens, everyone goes on camera, so that the public can see for themselves and identify the individuals responsible or irresponsible, as is the case often. Anyhow, it progressed, albeit with much dragging of feet, and at times we've had to really seriously bring those responsible to the point where they needed to make an undertaking. And as a result, one of the top accounting firms in the country, Deloitte, was engaged. Contracts were signed, and they commenced their work, and they they carried out a professional review of the payroll integrity, outdated IT systems, and the human resources management. And that review has been completed. Phase 2 is now, when the report has been presented, DPM will have to enforce any of the cost-saving measures identified in that report. And I would like the Minister for DPM to take note, Minister Joseph Sungi, Honorable Joseph Sungi, who has done a magnificent job since taking office, that a review committee needs to be established by your department. And at this juncture, I'd like to make a side note that ministers, many of you have departments and department heads who find ways not to do what they're supposed to do. In that instance, you must summon them immediately and ask them why not. And if they continue to turn up with this type of excuses, we cannot do this, we cannot do that, that person is not the right person for that job. And they must be removed immediately. I want to make a point of reference here while I'm talking about the matter of Department of Personnel Management. When I recall, when the Department of Personnel Management was under the ministerial management of the Honorable Elias Kapavore, that ministry started to perform. The minister undertook to review the performance of all heads of departments. And that ministry has the powers to do that. You don't have to wait for the ministers of those relevant departments to come and report to you. Carry out periodic assessments of the heads of various departments. And if they're not performing in the best interest of Papua New Guinea, they should be removed immediately. They are liabilities to this country with their non-performance, with their I cannot do this, I cannot do that attitude. We need people with I can do this attitude managing these organizations. Side note, commentary over. My second point here is that the government needs to carry out a very serious review. And if I am returned as the chairman of this Special Parliamentary Committee, Reform Committee, I will insist that I be given the authority to do this by Parliament. We need to carry out a review of all the creatures that we have created, government entities. The Attorney General stated in a 2018 report that there are 1,419 such organizations. Now, many of these organizations are performing in the best interest of Papua New Guinea. They are assets, but there's a great number of them that are liabilities. They have executives, some have boards, they have a budget line. We don't even know what they do. What do? They've become liabilities, soaking up significant amounts of money that ought to be going to aid posts, schools, roads, bridges, etc., etc. So I will insist, Treasurer, please take note, and the NEC, that we must carry out a review of these 1,419 entities. And we must decide which are assets and which are liabilities and deal with them accordingly. My third point is that a serious effort must be undertaken to review the activities being carried out in the black economy. That's right. We have a black economy. It's an illegal area, or an area where a lot of illegal activities are undertaken, where taxes are evaded, transfer pricing is taking place, very clever, elaborate tax evasion schemes and scams are established to avoid payment of taxes due to the state, due to the people of Papua New Guinea. These are like people, freeloaders, who live in a house, who occupy rooms, they use our electricity, they use our water, they raid the kitchen, they raid the farms, they watch TV, but they pay absolutely no taxes. They are parasites. And some of them are making significant profits and expanding into all manner of businesses right under our watch. And we call ourselves a free country, but we're too scared to address some of these characters. They've become so big and powerful, so powerful that we don't want to touch them. We ignore that they exist. Well, if we're doing this, then what's the point of waving our flag on the 16th of September every year and claiming that we're an independent country? If they're in here doing business, they must follow the laws. They must pay their taxes. And if they're not doing so, why do we entertain them? Many of us know who they are. We deal with them, become friends with them. We need to take these guys on. If we are really an independent country, then we need to make them pay their taxes. We need to hold them accountable. But we're not doing that. The black economy, I tell you, billions of kina in there that never make it into our coffers. Most of it is being transmitted offshore to build empires in other countries. And I must say that some of our neighbors know this too, but they allow them to invest in their countries. Treasurer, you need to set up a team. You need to set up a team consisting of the relevant government organizations and go after those players in the black economy. Deal with them. For example, did you know, Mr. Treasurer, through you, Mr. Speaker, that a large number of, or the large significant volumes of fuel used by some of the players in this black economy, especially those in the forestry sector and those in the fishery sector, large volumes of fuel come across the borders from Indonesia. They're never taxed, never taxed. They just hover just outside our EEZ, and ships go out there and get the fuel and come here and spread it out through their operations. They pay absolutely no excise duty on these taxes. Did you know that? Well, it's happening. All you have to do is ask for a report from the NIO, from Customs, from the Defense Intelligence Branch, and they will confirm this. It's been happening for a long time. Who's taking these guys to task? Nobody. Did you know, for instance, that a large number of consultants come into this country on business visas and tourist visas? They pay absolutely no income tax at all. Who's taking charge of this area? I'm confident that the new Minister for Labor and Migration will pay attention to this, take notes, and go and do something about this. Something needs to be done about the black economy. We cannot entertain parasites who don't pay their taxes while we overtax our people. Those involved in the SME businesses, legitimate investors, those who pay taxes. And at this juncture, I go to my next point, which is we have to pay attention to recommendations made in the Tax Review Committee. The Tax Review Committee was set up. I believe it was an initiative of the O'Neill government at that time. But at that time too, and now, no one has paid any attention to the findings of that Tax Review Committee. There are serious recommendations in there that we can take on board. And if they're dated, then put a new committee together, but use those findings, those recommendations, and see what we can do to give tax relief to our genuine taxpayers. Papua New Guineans and Papua New Guinea companies operating in Papua New Guinea pay the highest taxes in the region. Highest taxes. Highest taxes. Actually, if we reduce the taxes from where it is right now, I think it's 35% to 45%. If you reduce them to 10 to 15%, you'll find out that more people will actually turn up and pay their taxes. They will. There'll be incentives for them to pay their taxes. It's reasonable. And finally, Mr. Speaker, my final comment is that the NEC has to also be responsible. Oftentimes we read with dismay about scams and schemes that are processed through the NEC which cost this country significant amounts of money. That's right. We paid 300 million kina for seabed mining, an activity that benefited PNG in no way. Why? We bought generators that are not being used. Blackouts are still happening. We're leasing buildings that we don't really need at huge costs to the taxpayer. We've got to set the pace right there. Many of you ministers, if you see a submission coming before NEC that is irresponsible to this country, don't process it just because you're waiting for your submission to be coming in and also being approved. Think of your country. We swore an oath, didn't we? Before God, we held the Bible. We said that we would serve this country. Well, let's do it. Every time you're presented with the opportunity to live up to that oath, you should do so with great vigor and energy and pride. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, my final point is that we have to empower our entities that are going to go after the money. Our revenue collection arms, the Internal Revenue Collection Commission and Customs. Many times these organizations have brought submissions that are always knocked back, submissions for a retention of the percentage of the revenues that they collect so that they can continue to operate. Every time they turn up before the committee responsible for screening budgets, it is always cut down. And as a result, they're unable to carry out the audits, inspections, investigations, prosecutions required to collect money outstanding due to the people of Papua New Guinea. So, Treasurer, I would suggest that you bring these organizations, sit them down, listen to them, and let them get out there and perform their duties so that they can collect the monies that are due to this country, including those from the parasites that operate here and have grown very powerful. They've bought political stock. They do whatever they want in this country. They've essentially recolonized Papua New Guinea, and they keep getting away with it, and we ignore them and keep waving the flag on the 16th of September, claiming that we're an independent country. We are not. If we continue to allow these parasites to operate in our economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.